So the salons of the modern day context, the desire to bring something like this back for me was because I fundamentally have been thinking about what the future of learning is. And what is the responsibility of a modern day adult, both for themselves and for their communities, in terms of how they invest in themselves and in their life skills to be a responsible and a good citizen or a good human being of the 21st century.
So it's like a interesting non-university setting for education, self-education.
It's a co-created micro-learning outpost. And I like the idea of non-university only because I think, once again, like the French Enlightenment salons, we've brought this back to the intimacy of a living room. We've brought this back to a residential space where we're basically saying we need to bring this back home first to figure out, bring this back to the first principles of things to understand what is it that we really need to be cultivating at this point in time, as opposed to following some kind of top-down agenda of this is what you need to learn.
Do you use a specific medium to guide the curriculum?
The medium actually is largely through storytelling and immersive and experiential modalities. So we've used the arts, as you know, a lot. So we've used the arts, and I mean the vast gamut of the arts. I don't just mean performing arts. It's music, it's song, it's healing arts, all of it. The arts as a vehicle for delivering immersive storytelling, for bringing us out of our heads into our heart spaces, and for us to really get into a space of also tapping into our own sense of individuation, if you will, both through creativity, both through empathy, and the ability to connect with you by sharing experience. So the medium largely has been to activate the space through a ritualized performance of some sort, a ritualized storytelling of some sort, which also, by the way, ties back into, and I was talking to this wonderful woman named Olga. She reminded me that storytelling circles back in the day, pre-old ancient civilizations, we learned by sitting around the fire.
Yeah,
and telling ourselves,
came second.
telling ourselves stories. So these were actually like formats which kind of transcended language before we knew it, right? So yeah. Tell us a little bit about tell me a little bit about you first. Okay, your story, because this is also partly about, this is almost like a storytelling session, right? Give me a little bit about the journey of your life and what brought you here.
So I was born in Detroit, Michigan. I lived there for the first 10 years of my life. And then I lived just outside of Charleston, South Carolina. And then I moved to just south of Jacksonville, Florida from the ages of like 12 to 18. And then I've been up in the New York City area ever since. And I suppose when I was a kid, I was an only child for the first 4 years, and then my sisters were born. And I was always I'd read books, and then I would act them out and play dress up. And then I would watch movies and do the same thing. So it was a lot of self-guided imagination were my kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
Loved learning, loved school, loved information, basically. And when I don't know if it was because of the moving or when puberty hit or for whatever reason, I was bullied really badly in the 7th grade. And this was...
And how old were you in 7th grade?
Probably 12 or 13.
Mm-hmm.
Lost all my friends, didn't speak during the day, and I had no interest in computers, so I took the other elective that was available, which was drama. And at that time, I was kind of more gearing in toward math and science type things, or that's where I kind of felt pushed to be in. And I was good at it, but it just was whatever. And so I took this drama class, and I remember loving it because it was sometimes the only point of the day where I talked. And
so for you, an expression,
it was really
outlet for your voice.
Yeah, I felt something click, and I remember being terrified. I auditioned going into 8th grade for the advanced drama program, and I remember being terrified to tell my parents that I really wanted to do this. No reason, it was all my own kind of, I guess, residual guilt for maybe wanting to do something with my life that wasn't math or science related. And I told them, they were really supportive, and slowly I started gathering my friend group back. But around the same time, I had developed an eating disorder from all of the trauma about the bullying. I guess it was a way to like kind of control things that I had no control over. And so around that time, over a few years, I had some really bad eating disorder issues. And I was starting to use something that came from this act of love, the acting, the theater, and using it to kind of like prove my self-worth. And something else came up in my life unexpectedly. I started practicing yoga just randomly at the local YMCA when I was 16. And then when I moved up to New York to study theater, I continued it. And so I was doing the whole New York thing, and I was still kind of like, I had a teacher say like white knuckling the acting, like I gotta be good at this, I gotta be good at this. And then one day I woke up doing the traditional kind of like New York artist thing and working 6 jobs and being miserable, and I was going to practice. And by that time I'd really gotten deep into a regular yoga practice. And I woke up one morning around the age of like 22, 23, and I thought like, I'm a different person. So I gotta kind of figure out what happened. So I went and studied yoga, became a yoga teacher, 800-hour certified teacher, took 2 years off of acting and everything, with no expectation to go back or whatever, because I just didn't know who I was anymore. Mm-hmm. And through that kind of reclamation of my body and my mind, really definitely the taming of the mind, I came back into acting because I realized I did love it and I did have something to say. And so I do that, and I teach yoga as well.
That's amazing. So I give you a little bit of my own journey as well. I grew up in India. I come from a society where grades and accomplishment and success as defined by a report card is lorded over your head from the get-go. My parents have never put pressure on me academically, but I was one of these crazy children where when I was at age 4, I was like, I want to be number 1 in everything. So I had this crazy achievement-focused streak from the time I remember. And my singular focus all through school was I had to be the first ranker in my class. And I kept that for a very long time. But what it did was it came at the cost of sacrificing myself. As a child, I was acutely unhappy. I was highly strung. I think I drove myself to points of extreme performance anxiety when I look back on it. And in 11th grade, there was a complexity of factors that culminated in this, but I had my first nervous breakdown. I woke up for at least 6 months, I think, where I would just wake up in the morning and cry for about 6 or 7 hours during the day. And my parents didn't know what to do with me. And at that point in time, I went from being someone that had aced all my classes consistently up until 11th grade, and I missed half a year of school. I remember sitting outside my principal's office, and she took one look at me and she said, "You don't need to do these exams. Just go home and take care of yourself and come back." So that was my first wake-up call to what that kind of pressure, even if this was kind of self-inflicted, but it was self-inflicted, but I was also internalizing the echo chamber of what my society was kind of pushing.
Your mind goes one direction and your body goes another.
Yeah, exactly. But it was also because I was interiorizing what was perceived to be the pressures and expectations of society, even if my parents were extraordinarily supportive. Then I had 4 happy years of college here in the United States, where I broke free of all of this. And then I went into a very high-intensity, high-stakes job in finance on the trading floor. Again, same kind of classic pattern of 2002 to 2016 was like about this trajectory. I'm really not really wanting to get off that roller coaster. Meaning, if it didn't go up, I was in trouble. I couldn't reconcile my own identity if it wasn't going up. I had a bit of a professional setback end of 2016, but I will say what happened was in 2008, the financial crisis happened. And I experienced, and it might have been a little bit of a hormonal thing going on at that time as well, but it was also, again, the convergence of acute stress, being in the middle of a product that was that caused the financial crisis, watching the world burn around you and feeling kind of culpable because you were sort of selling the stuff that was kind of like these financially engineered products that were kind of decimating the nation and possibly the economies around the world. And as a young person, I must have been in my 20s then, really having a wake-up call on what is my act of service to the world? Is it this? And but at the same time, I think because of hormonal fluctuations, I think I was turning 30 actually. I fell into a deep depression. It was 6 to 9 months. It was like this dark tunnel that had no ending. I would wake up every day feeling absolutely abject and pointless about life. There are days I'll remember, like I would come back from work and I'll stand on the tracks of the PATH station, and I'll just stand there being like, I don't know why I'm going home now. You know, and so this great sense of futility and desperation set in, and that was probably my entrance into mind, body, spirit healing. I took up a Pilates certification, and the act of conditioning the body through that discipline really changed my life because it gave me a spine on which to hang my sense of selfhood on, to go back to the body and return to the center of the wisdom of the body, and to really learn to develop a kind of somatic intelligence. And in Pilates, just like yoga, there's a deep sense of body awareness because it's an alignment-based practice, but it's also a mind-body integrated practice. Since I certified to teach, but I haven't taught and I haven't actually practiced Pilates in a long time, I went into yoga. And the thing about striving is that yoga broke that pattern of striving for me.
Same.
It came from chronic pain,
Same.
a lot of injuries.
Well, it makes you not lie to yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what really, like, it's been my
That's
process of, like, and this trying to construct an identity that others want because I was outcast before, or the same thing as you, the thing that's desirable or productive. You end up really having to lie to yourself a lot in order to try to change those things about yourself that are inconvenient, right? So it's been, for me, yoga has been this, and theater too. Because, I mean, I had a teacher that said, like, the body doesn't lie. You can tell when somebody's lying on stage because of their body and how they hold it.
Yeah.
So it's really been this unfolding process of self-acceptance.
And self-love and compassion. I think all words, people hear so much these days that they've almost become cliches, but I think you really need to wade into the journey deep of your own unhappiness and your own sense of alienation from self and displacement from self to really understand what it means to, you are the person that's going to walk by your side every day. Waking up to that. Can we switch gears a little bit and talk about the different kinds of intelligence? Because this ties back into why did we decide to do a salon on body-based intelligence? What does somatic intelligence have to do with emotional literacy? Can I start with just like my own reframing of intelligence? Gone from sort of very strong core textbook-based intelligence, which is what was disseminated in India, to experiential intelligence, which is learning by doing. That's the job. Like, learn everything what I learned on the trading floor, to then going to becoming Pilates, like training in Pilates and then yoga, which then tap into this different kind of intelligence, which is self-based intelligence, where your body is a compass, your mind, body, spirit. You're learning to read the tea leaves of yourself, right? And so now I'm solidly at a point where I believe that intelligence has to be mixed media. Intelligence needs to come from...
I don't like specialization.
It's got to be liberal arts. It's got to be like sort of... it has to come from multiple sources. It has to come from extrinsically and it has to come intrinsically. Right? So tell me a little bit about what your view on this is.
Well, I think what I just said, there's no such thing as specialization because it kind of gives you tunnel vision, and I've definitely experienced that before. Because everything's connected, every form of knowledge is connected.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, music is math, but felt math, sensed math, right? And then, you can use so many different forms to understand an abstract concept, right? And as knowledge is true human knowledge, and I mean human because you can put in a system of data points in a computer and it memorizes it, right? But does that make it intelligent? To me, no. It gives it one form of intelligence, but I heard somebody say once, we don't even have any capability or anywhere near the capability to program a computer to do what a 2 or 3-year-old does, and they can see and know who their parents are from across a baseball diamond just by the way they move. That's a different form of intelligence.
So let's talk about that for a second. Sensory intelligence. What is it that kids have that as adults we lose?
Imagination.
And you think that contributes to sensory intelligence? Or?
Yeah, because if we only rely upon our senses, and this is a yoga thing, senses are amazing for understanding the world around us, but they're very limited. And we know this to be true because, like, I'm wearing glasses, so my eyes don't work very well if I don't wear glasses. So I get different information with and without this filter. So senses are just a filter for how you interface with the world. And some people have stronger senses than the others. I think what kids have that adults have trained out of them, but I think you can turn that switch back on, is imagination. is maybe a more internal sensory awareness. And I think that imagination doesn't just exist from the shoulders up, it exists throughout the entire body, because you're informed by the wisdom of your ancestors and your genetics and millions of years of evolution. So you have all of that experiential knowledge, and then you have this consciousness that we relatively don't know anything about, that also contributes to that. So I think you have a lot of history that informs you as a kid that you're in awe of, and as an adult, the awe kind of wears off a little bit unless you really invest in a practice that gets you back into that ancient and imaginative wisdom that is built into whatever this toolbox of mind and body that we have is.
I think it's also, as adults, we kind of condition ourselves to move away from something that is raw and unedited, I think, as well. I think kids tend to feel everything in their raw form. And kids are unedited in the way they experience the world, because they do not carry the kind of filters in terms of conditioned precepts that we then impose on them as adults, and we also impose on ourselves. And so for me, one of the fundamental joys of kind of returning back to a childlike state is a freedom of stepping away from the what should be to what really is.
And it's also forgiveness too, because kids are pretty forgiving to themselves and others. It's not, I think when we hold on to past narratives, then we I said something bad in a relationship, and then my spouse is using it against me 6 years later, instead of it being like, that was me yesterday, today I'm a new human. And I think kids are able to wake up a little bit more without that narrative of the past or what should happen in the future kind of holding them back.
Totally. And I also think that one thing that is very liberating about kids, and which goes back now to child's play, and what you and I have been kind of concepting, is that kids also have a certain dexterity with the entire emotional range, because they give themselves the permission to go from sadness to happiness to laughter
without
anger.
Clinging. But the thing is, without clinging onto it.
Yeah. And so I think for me, this concept of a salon, of doing a parent-child salon, of intergenerational communication, is almost as much of the parent learning from the child and how to engage in child's play. And child's play is actually very tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
Because I think somehow we think that anything that children do, there's a certain infantilization that happens. But in fact, I think that these are the most profound beings with such an altered sense of consciousness.
Yeah.
And I was listening to one of the Tim Ferriss podcasts, and someone on there, as a child psychologist, was talking about how kids' consciousness is actually called lantern consciousness. It's amplified consciousness. Whereas as adults, we kind of go into this kind of narrow micro-lens consciousness.
Yeah.
And so much of the ideation for me of this salon actually is to bring a parent and a child together, or an intergenerational coupling, to happen, where we effectively learn from our different somatic contexts, from our different...
Well, adults learn how to communicate pretty effectively, and that's where the lens gets narrowed, right? So for the kid learning from the adult, it's how do I keep the integrity of these emotions and thoughts and experiences, but learn how to effectively communicate it in a way that doesn't silence or hurt anybody else, but also doesn't silence or hurt myself. And for the adult, it's exactly what you said. It's letting the consciousness kind of descend down throughout the whole body and
go non-linguistic.
Exactly.
And go
to
non-language
allow the
based.
abstract to be perceived.
So look, what do you think if someone that doesn't know us, someone that has never been to a salon before, if I asked you, what do you think, what can they expect from this? What would you say?
Well, to move. Don't wear clothes that are constricting at all. Because somatic intelligence is really what we're going for here, activating that. And I expect, to laugh, to not hold yourself accountable to reach a certain standard. And I think a great thing to kind of pre-program in your head before you come is like the first rule of improv is to always say yes. So I would just come prepared to say yes. And if you say no, look and self-reflect and ask why.
I like that. I look forward to doing this with you.
Me
For
too.
anyone who doesn't know Katherine and I, we plan on rolling a series of these parent-child salons using body-based intelligence, the body as a compass for emotional literacy, and helping us get in touch with various aspects of ourselves in a group setting, but also individually in this most private of moments, in the way you interact and engage with the body and how you negotiate space when there's others in the room. And I hope you will join us at a future salon. And the series is called Child's Play. Thanks for listening.